Allison's here. One person. What?
I wasn't here Thursday or Friday.
So if you weren't here Thursday, Friday, raise your hand and keep it up for the rest of the period.
Oh, yay. All right. I've done this before. I'm sure it's used to it.
I believe it, yeah.
Katie's making
Permanently surrendering. Okay. So, first things first. I hope everyone liked the video. Were these special effects on Friday too much for you?
It was so good. It was probably the best thing
Did you like it? I thought it was great. It's a little silly. I love that one. The reanimation of the dead didn't scare you guys too much?
No.
You got Thursday and Friday? Okay, Friday, so we watched it, and it is on Teams. Teams got all messed up and erased everything for everybody, I guess, on Friday. Does I understand it? But I put it back on. All right. So are there any questions from the video on Thursday? I know I went through a couple things really fast.
Do you have an extra one of the questions prompts for Thursday?
Like this. Go like that. That's where the paper cut's going.
Oh.
Where's the worst place to get a paper cut? Well, your eye. Okay, I'll go with the eye. Second worst.
Jugular.
I think the worst place is right
If you've had to lick 1,000 envelopes, that is a real danger. Paper cut like that. I'll let you ponder that one for a second. Any questions? Everyone look at the Thomas Jefferson one. Any questions? Lurking behind me?
Yeah.
Let's look at this real quick. No questions? Hey, quiet. Okay, say it again. What did he do? Any location number 9?
He promoted equality, pardoned, arrested people under the state.
Yeah, so a couple of the big things were a little bit on equality, at least for comment for men, and he did. A number of people were arrested under the Sedition Act. They would be pardoned. There weren't that many people arrested under the Sedition Act, but the threat of arrest was such a big deal. They also cut taxes and cut the military, which then he would go to war against the Barbary pirates. Yes.
the lady's like.
The lady?
Yeah.
She was so nice.
This one?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I know. That one we're not talking. We're talking about the one on for Thursday.
Oh, so she's so
Oh,
she looks over.
okay. I wasn't either. Hey, I decided I'm going to give you a 3-day week. I just decided today. Yeah. We have homework?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But I'll pay it back. In June, I'll trust you. June 10th, you'll be done with school. I'll pay it back after the AP exam, I promise. That's when we'll have some fun moat digging. I'm saving the moat till May. Think about it. The howler monkeys would just be coming back on their migration. We can dig under the pleasant sounds of howler monkeys. Yes? See what? You watched it? Ah! Where is yours? Well, it's due. I'm going to collect it. All right, any more questions? Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? All right. Nothing? Put your name on it. Turn it up. Put your name on and turn them in. Let's go. Name on, turn them in. I'll give you a little credit for it. Where we can get there. I believe. You're here, I know you. And that's, I know you're here. Tomorrow? Who's going to be gone tomorrow? Quiz. Oh, yeah. Quiz chapter 7. Only 10 questions, unless you want more. More? Only 10 questions. They'll be matching for chapter 7. That's good. All right, I'm just going to give you some credit for doing it. And, the one, I haven't had time to grade it, but looking at the ones you did on Friday, they look really good. Good job on that. And I like it. They cover the main events. The whole argument was about big central government and small central government, urban versus rural, different points of view. It was good. I enjoyed that one. So that one was one of the first videotapes that was ever purchased at Capitol High. An old videotape. And it's really old. I still have a videotape player. I still have a few videotapes. You know what a videotape is? Some of you probably do. All right, so let's go through a couple things of Jefferson, fill in a couple blanks. I got to talk about his philosophy. Tomorrow we're going to fight a war. Wednesday we'll finish the war. Sound good?
Okay.
Another war of 1812, and then Thursday and Friday, you have to come, but you don't have to be in class. Just mill around outside. Sound good? Mill around the park.
Is that what you're doing?
Huh?
Is that what you're
Yeah,
doing?
well, they let me out occasionally. So hopefully Thursday I'll be able to go out for a little air. I get to go in the exercise yard, pace, and they make me come back in.
That's gonna be our homework.
We got this, we got this, we got this. We got here, didn't we? Did we get Adams versus Jefferson, the rematch?
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole country been destroyed. Creepy pictures of them. All right, so what am I doing? They both nasty campaign, called each other traitors. A lot of hinting about Jefferson's life. Jefferson was a widower, but as it turned out that Jefferson's I guess it would be half sister-in-law, happened to go with him to Paris. We'll get back to that. So, remember, the electors are chosen by the state assembly, and what are we throwing wadded up paper back here for? Huh? He's being meaty? Did you actually say meaty? Good. Yeah. Put +1 in your notes. All right. Jefferson won. He got the electoral call. He got the majority. 73 was the majority of electors, but remember, each elector had 2 votes. They thought they had it solved. For example, in the Federalist, all but one of the electors voted for Charles Pinckney. One voted for John Jay. Jay wasn't really running, but the idea would be that if the Federalists won, Adams be first, Pinckney second. They did the same thing for the Republicans. But the Republican electors, nobody was really sure who was not supposed to vote for Burr. And they didn't want another remake, a replay of 1796. So they all voted for Burr. Aaron Burr of New York, who was put up as the vice president, even though in the Electoral College at this time, there was no difference between somebody going for vice president or president. They were all technically running the second place one's vice president. They all voted for Burr, and so it's a tie. So technically, both had a majority. Ties go to the House. Now, Madison and George Mason, for example, both said all elections would be solved in the House because it'll be the best people like us come together and they'll choose the most patriotic statesman. Remember Federalist number 10, if they actually believe that. Well, this is kind of a catastrophe because that's not at all what's happening here. Obviously, the electors wanted Jefferson. But Burr, I thought it'd be kind of cool to be president. Burr was very intelligent. He was a war hero during the Revolutionary War, but also was incredibly ambitious like they all were. So he didn't drop out and went to the House of Representatives. Each state had 1 vote. So for example, the 10 members of the House from New York would get together, vote for which one they wanted, Burr or Jefferson. Whoever won that vote of the 10 members would get New York's one vote. So that's how they chose. The Federalists, a lot of them were like, wouldn't this be awesome if the leader of the Republican Party lost? The Republicans would be humiliated. They don't like Burr. They'd be bitterly divided. It'll be a victory for us in the long run. It will destroy the Republicans. But there are a lot of Federalists who also said the country is slightly over a decade old, remember, with the new Constitution. If we have a contested election like this and it blows up in people's face, how long would the country survive? So there's a real feeling of some Federalists, as much as we don't like Jefferson, if we don't pick Jefferson, the whole thing will fall apart. It'll be so fraudulent. But Hamilton, not that he had a lot of friends, but he had a lot of influence. He despised Burr, not just because of the fear of the new republic. He really hated Burr more than Jefferson. And Hamilton threw his support to Jefferson. This convinced a couple Federalist states to go for Jefferson and 2 just to leave it blank, vote for nobody, so they wouldn't have to go through the indignity of voting for Jefferson, but Jefferson got enough votes. And that's how Jefferson became president, Burr vice president. Needless to say, there'd be a lot of animosity against Burr. Burr would try to run for governor of New York a little bit later. Hamilton would campaign against him again, and Burr would lose. We're leading up to something. Yes?
Why did they hate her so much?
Partially because Burr was a little bit, at least they thought he was a little bit duplicitous. He would do anything for power to win. And a lot of that's probably exaggerated. Burr was actually very intelligent and kind of scared him. But Burr was pretty powerful. Hamilton didn't get along. So, here's the other thing though. Remember slave power. The three-fifths compromise. Without slave power, Jefferson would not be elected. That's why he's going to be called the Negro president in the North, even by Northern Republicans who did not like slave power. Remember, slave power, the three-fifths compromise. Now, most states still had slavery, but the majority of slaves were here, and that gave them a greater population, and therefore more members of the House, and therefore more members of the Electoral College. If they only counted free citizens as population, therefore reducing the number of representatives, Adams would have 65, Jefferson 63. That's how close it would have been. Now, it should sound horrible, the idea of not counting people in the United States as population and not counting slaves. But I'm giving you the point of view of many northern states who said the slave owners or the slave herders have all this power. And who's therefore the chief slave herder? Jefferson, and that's why they called him this. This is one of Jefferson trying to talk philosophy. Jefferson would talk about how slavery was wrong, and then he was a slave herder. And here him is like a rooster, and the hens are the slaves. And whenever they draw somebody for Africa, for reasons that aren't really clear, they always drew him with a turban, which makes no sense for sub-Saharan Africa, but if they had a turban, that meant from Africa. It doesn't make sense at all. But Jefferson, it was a whispering campaign in 1800. It would come all out in 1804. In 1804, remember that half sister-in-law of Jefferson? Her name was Sally Hemings, and it would come public. This is from the North in 1804, hammering these Virginia slave owners. We saw Sally Hemings in the video, right? Sally Hemings' half-sister was Jefferson's wife. So who was Sally Hemings' father? Jefferson's father, a slave owner. Do you catch that? Remember the fornication laws? So Sally, so this is the slave that would have Jefferson's children. And yes, all these red-headed children would be running around. And they were slaves. And so this is attacking slaveholders for their hypocrisy. People like Jefferson, whipping the slaves and that. And that is, it's a bitter attack. This would come out in 1804. Jefferson would still be elected president, so we're not going to details of that election. But he went pretty handily. This issue of slave power is coming big, is going to become bigger and bigger. And I should add, things like this infuriated Southern plantation owners. How dare let our dirty laundry out like this? And they would get really mad when it would come out what they were doing. And everyone knew. And so, let's get to Jefferson's philosophy. And Jefferson's philosophy, he called it a revolution, we saw that in the video, but it really wasn't that much of a revolution, except for this idea of the common man. They didn't really change a lot in government, but they made some changes. Jefferson acted like a commoner. Now, when I mean commoner, I'm going to be clear about this. I don't mean average. Commoner means not of aristocratic birth. Now, he would claim, I don't have a titled nobility, but Jefferson was born rich. He inherited hundreds of slaves. He is, by definition, American aristocracy, and yet he claimed he was not one of them. He would ride around the muddy streets of Washington, D.C. in torn breeches. It's called pants, kind of these tight pants they would wear. So he'd be like a commoner like anybody else. He was the first one to shake hands with people he would meet, as opposed to Washington and Adams, we just kind of bow. And like a commoner, we're all the same. And that would be the first part of this philosophy. The idea of the common man. The common man should have power. Now, when I mean common man, we're talking common white man. Once again, not average. Common as in not aristocratic. But of course, he wasn't aristocrat. This would be the basis of Jeffersonian democracy, where white men are sovereign. Now, he would say the people, but everybody knew what that meant. Now, once again, this is a big step, but obviously not big enough if you're a believer in democracy. But there's something else. Who would they vote for? The people are sovereign. Jefferson acted like a commoner, but they would vote for him. Jefferson did all these things to act like something he wasn't. A man who toiled in the dirt, yet had 250 slaves to do it. That is his home at Monticello. How many stories is that? How many stories? 1, 2, 3. How many does it look? Doesn't it look like a 2-story house, doesn't it? He wanted it to look like a smaller house so he would not show off his wealth. It's, if you count the basement, then 4 more stories. These are 2 stories. The windows are huge. The door is huge. You walk in, the door is about right here. You open the door, the massive door, and you go into the little foyer, and it's bisected by a floor. The foyer. He wanted it to look like a smaller house than this actual huge mansion. Massive windows. But there's a floor right there. And then another floor, and then the top. Yeah. Yeah. So they're lower. He designed it himself to look like a more common house. It's really cool. But it's huge. So from a distance, though, it looks like 2 stories. That's what he wanted. Then you get closer. Wow. This is the illusion. Jeffersonian democracy was still the elites are in charge. Jackson would be different. As flawed as Jackson was. Of course, who isn't flawed but outside of this room? Outside of this room. We're all equal. I'm more equal. But Next part of his philosophy, he saw the best case scenario as agrarian. That's one of the great things that video did, of showing you the merchant centers and his fear of the wealth and commerce of people stacked on top of each other. He saw everybody as agrarian or agricultural, and small farmers. Everybody's a yeoman. Yeoman. Yeoman means small independent farmers. They own their own land. A yeoman. A tiller of the soil, like this picture, idealized vision of the frontier farmer. Or this as the Midwestern farmer. This is a group called the Grange after the Civil War, as the master of their domain. Independent farmers. Remember the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But how can you possibly have life and independence or freedom of conscience if you don't own your own land? Therefore, land ownership. That means you are truly free. You're not dependent upon anybody else. And this, let me get one more thing. And if you're a wage earner, you're not really a wage earner, you're a what? A wage slave. You're dependent upon somebody else for your livelihood, and you're not truly free. Not just at the workplace, but they could coerce you, for example, to vote for somebody you might not want to. How can you have a republic if you're not free? Yes, here's the slaveholder saying this. And in many ways, this Jeffersonian idea would become the American dream of the 19th century, to own your own little piece of land. And so many people wanted to own that piece of land and become independent. The Great Depression would totally blow that idea. But still, people go back to this. How many people, when they get wealth, they want to own that little piece of land? And how many people are very, very wealthy that move into Montana, they act like a rancher? So it sticks with it. And it's not, I'm not making a value judgment. People still do it. It's just that very few people can make a living off it anymore. Anti-wage slave. Next thing, he feared the large central government. Large central government. I'll tell you my story about meeting the freemen down the river. They were anti-government militia in Jordan, Montana. Well, they feared this large central government. And what he believed is government should be hands-off. This is a French term, laissez-faire, but being an American, every year this has been in classes. I've taken a lot of economics, I have a minor. But it was, as an American, it's laissez-faire, but it's French, laissez-faire. And that means hands-off, with the idea that government hands-off would be the best way to preserve small independent farmers or merchants. He actually didn't mind manufacturing. He wanted it to be small. And as he saw, remember his point of view, the Assumption Bill, the Bank of the United States in tariffs. Large central governments help the wealthy. Or at least the merchant class wealthy. Why? Monopolies. They give monopolies to things like the Bank of the United States. He feared that monopoly. That's why he wanted the capital in a rural area. Here's Washington in 1800, and this is greatly exaggerated. There was nothing here. I like this picture. This is a painting of the Executive Mansion. It was not yet called the White House when John Adams moved in. And I like the fact that there's nothing around it. There was literally nothing there. And Jefferson thought we have to keep away from the financial centers of New York and Philadelphia. The next part about this is, if you're going to have a government, he didn't want another situation with the mercenaries and the Assumption Bill. He wanted a frugal government. You have to cut spending because you didn't want long-term debt. And also, he feared the taxes. Remember the excise tax on whiskey or the tariffs he opposed, the protective tariff. But because of that, they raised those taxes for the Navy, for example, in the Quasi-War. Here's the Constellation. They cut back on the tiny Navy and the tiny Army. They kept the professional Army. Here's one of the most important forts. They were just starting to train officers at West Point. Soon you'll be in the military academy. Frugal means careful with your money. He was not necessarily opposed to debt. He didn't like that long-term debt and what that could do for speculation. Remember the assumption, though. That's the way he's looking at it. So these are all things he addressed in his inaugural address. And he's obsessed with the West. As he sees it, the Wild West. Now here's the Wild West. The Wild West, it's got to be open for yeomen. And so this was an idea that would go on, and so he would start with, Jefferson did not begin it, but the first president to actively push for this. Washington would have agreed, but when Washington was president, this is the West. Now it's moving further. Adams was on the fence, Jefferson, and this would be a big element of Jackson. We have to open up this land for small farmers. Democracy, as he saw it. Other things too, obviously. But remember, he's a plantation owner. Plantation owners, here's a tobacco plantation. Remember, they use up the land. He's desperate for land. And his plan was this. If yeomen are going to live here, he thought this would be more than enough land for 100 years. Couldn't imagine how fast the population would grow. We need this land. Which when he became president, he had just got back from Spain and France to force the American Indians, the tribes to live here, force them here. As his idea was, as he claimed, and then someday they'll be ready to assimilate or enter American civilization, literal civilization. So we're setting up Indian removal. These are the basic ideas of Jefferson's plan, but there's one that's even more important. The most, almost forgot one thing. These are creeks, by the way, that would be forced westward in 1837, 34 through 37. Jefferson's back porch of his home faced west. He was obsessed with going west. Would talk about going up the Potomac. This beautiful place called Harper's Ferry, which is now in West Virginia along the Potomac. He would go there and look at a mountain. It's called Jefferson's Roost now. There's a little mountain above the town and look westward and contemplate moving west. Just his obsession. And he wanted the land. Speculation. He was intensely pragmatic. Pragmatic is another way to think about it. The closest single word would be practical. You come up with a problem, you do whatever is necessary to get the problem solved. Even if it goes against what you said before. Even if. And that's what the video did so well. It talked about what Jefferson said and then how he acted. I like how the video said Hamiltonian. Jefferson claimed a strict interpretation of the Constitution, enumerated powers, all of that. Nowhere in the Constitution does it have a provision on how the United States will buy land or what will become of that land, and yet he bought Louisiana. Why? We had to do it. That's pragmatic. He went to his own undeclared war against the Barbary pirates. Remember, he bitterly attacked Adams for the Quasi-War. He knew slavery. This is the Barbary War. He knew slavery, and that's branding a slave. Yes, literally branding a human being. He knew slavery would destroy the Republic. He knew slavery was immoral. And yet, not only did he keep his slaves and did not free hardly any of them after he died, he did everything he can to push slavery westward once he became president. And he knew it was bad. That's pragmatism. He didn't want to give up his life. He didn't want to give up his political support. What do you call it if somebody is pragmatic, aka says one thing and does something else? What's another term their political opponents might call him?
Hypocrite.
Yeah, it kind of is hypocritical. And of course he would say, and I like the video, says, I had to do it. I had to do it. Most of the successful presidents in American history were intensely pragmatic and are all going to be called hypocrites by their political opponents. Everybody from Jackson to Abraham Lincoln was intensely pragmatic. to a lesser degree, Teddy Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was very pragmatic. Eisenhower, Johnson, Kennedy. To even ones that I will tell you right now I don't like. Richard Nixon was pragmatic. In your lifetime, Bush wasn't all that pragmatic. A little bit. Barack Obama defined pragmatic. That was his whole life, was pragmatism. Trump is pragmatic, without a doubt. Biden's very pragmatic. And yes, you can find answers where you say, you said this and did this. You can see it over and over again. That's pragmatism. That is the most important part of their philosophy. He's going to do what needs to be done. Jefferson claimed he didn't like a strong central government, and as soon as he became president, this ain't so bad when I'm in charge. But you're going to find that time after time. Whenever a party's out of power, they're going to claim the party in power is using too much, abusing their power. And then as soon as the other party gets in, that flops. Immediately, overnight. They're dictators! And then once they get power, no, we're just doing what's necessary. And everything reverses. Every time. Pragmatism. So, Jefferson, everyone knew he'd be president by December of 1800. But he's not going to take office until March 3rd, 1801. This huge 5-month gap. Today, the election's early November, but the president isn't inaugurated until January 20th. They would change that in 1933. Change the Constitution. Mark, that's 5 months. Adams is still president. And Adams decides Jefferson's going to destroy the country. So what does Adams do? He and the Federalists in Congress. The Federalists still control Congress. The new Republican-controlled Congress won't take their seats until August of 1801. It's really weird. It's called the Midnight Justices. The Federalists, with Adams' support, create a bunch of new district courts, and therefore a bunch of new federal courts and a bunch of new judges. And who appoints judges? The president. And how long is a term? A lifetime appointment. Most importantly, Adams appointed a brand new Chief Justice, John Marshall. The Chief Justice, John Jay, resigned, so Adams could appoint a young man, and he would be the Chief Justice for 36 years, having that much influence over the court. A young Federalist, John Marshall. Here's Marshall. They used to do, justices used to ride what's called the circuit court, and they would go to their different circuits. So they started appointing. So midnight, meaning just before they left office. And I should add, does anybody know the term for somebody who is still in office, but either not going to run again or didn't win re-election, but they're still in office so their term is done? Anybody know the term for that? Yeah. Say it again. Well, incumbent means somebody who is holding the office, but they're going to run again. They're called a lame duck. A lame duck is somebody who's in office, but they're going to leave office. They're not running for re-election, or they've lost. He's this lame duck, but he's doing as much as he can. Boom, boom, boom. Jefferson was furious. I should add that then, at the inauguration, Adams went home. He was so mad and pouting and being a little crybaby, he wouldn't go to Jefferson's inauguration. There'd be a few more that wouldn't do it. Adams' son would not go to Andrew Jackson's inauguration. Andrew Johnson didn't go, the first president to be impeached. He wouldn't go to Rutherford B. Hayes' inauguration. It wasn't seen as that big of a deal. Then became established, you gotta go, even if you don't like him, you gotta go to your successor. So for 140 years, they all went then after that, until Trump. Trump did not go to the inauguration. So he was the first one since Andrew Johnson. So, the Marshall Court then would be known for nationalist decisions, strengthening the federal government, strengthening the central government. Nationalist in this context means for the central government. That's Marshall right here. Well, one of those courts Seems to a guy named Freddie Marbury right here. Now just this Marbury, one of those new judgeships. He's quick appointed just a couple days before Jefferson was inaugurated. Jefferson's Secretary of State was James Madison. Now back then, the Secretary of State was responsible for seating federal judges. It's not done this way now. Well, Madison refused to seat him. And then the Republicans a year later got rid of his judgeship. He sued Madison. The Marshall Court ruled in his favor. But more importantly, this decision would change everything. The most important court case in American history, Marbury versus Madison, would lay out the concept that the Supreme Court has judicial review. If there is a court case, they can check the constitutionality of laws. If there's a court case. This is not in the Constitution. They gave themselves this power. And no, not everybody would agree. Jefferson immediately wanted to impeach him, and the Republicans even suggested term limits. Jefferson despised the court. These bunch of unelected Federalist elites will dominate our lives. This didn't happen. They would impeach one judge, another Pinckney, who was openly corrupt and losing his mind. But that was it. This would not be fully accepted until after the Civil War. And today it's used all the time. So basically the Supreme Court is now like this unelected legislature. And they vote on laws all the time. All the time. And the current court has thrown out more laws than any other previous court. And they're going to throw out a bunch more this year. So this court is really radical, but that power came from here. So you have to know this case. Marbury versus Madison. Put a star by it, italicize it, underline it, bold it, put a smiley face next to it, draw a picture of it. Everybody make a card. Let's do a little flip book of it. Marbury versus Madison. Doing the court case. So, Jefferson was president. Once he became president, one of the first things he wanted to do is open up land to small farmers. Open it up. He wanted to sell as small as parcels as possible so the speculators can't scoop it up. 2 laws will come out of this. The first one is called the Enabling Act of 1803. That created the state of Ohio. Ohio, then remember, this is for the Treaty of Grenville of 1794. And also set aside money for education, setting that precedent for public education. It was implied in the Northwest Ordinance, it became law. So basically the sale of 1 section per township would go for public education. No, it's not yet required public education, but eventually you can see the precedent coming, where government land sales will pay for not only primary education, but the big one are going to be for colleges. Colleges. They will be called land grant colleges. In fact, every state will have a land grant college. Anybody know the land grant college in Montana that was paid for by fully at first by the sale of public land? MSU, yes. And that's why if it's by land grant, there's a larger agricultural school there because of that. That's the legacy. Usually in states, it's the state university is the land grant college. Not always. And so, one more act. The Land Act of 1804, it allowed for smaller plots of land to be sold so average farmers could buy them. And so this became a Republican experience in the Ohio. All these small farmers are going to move in. This guy would go through and he planted a bunch of apple orchards with the idea being these new small farmers could come in and already have a crop ready to pick and sell. Who was this guy? He was a Republican. A Republican as a Jeffersonian Republican. Real man. Apples, it's not the apples. That would be the big thing. What would be the big thing? Hard cider. Remember the whiskey tax, hard cider, the ferment. That was the big thing they were selling then. Open up the land. Limited effect, and speculators still scooped up a lot of it. At the same time, Barbary pirates, the U.S. signed a treaty, basically gave Barbary pirates these bunch of little sultanates here in North Africa, technically part of the Ottoman Empire, but kind of breaking away. They have been stopping ships, stealing their products, and enslaving passengers. Big part of the slave trade. Here, this was called the Barbary Post. Jefferson refused to pay the tribute, the bribe. They started capturing American-owned merchant ships, and Jefferson sent the tiny little U.S. Navy without a declaration of war. Technically, this is called the Tripoli War. Tripoli is right here, the capital of present-day, well, the kind of mess that is Libya. Colonization, former Italian colony too. This undeclared war. Now, the U.S. had a tiny little navy that's already shrunk. Just a few naval infantry. Back then, ships had to have infantrymen. Yeah, they board each other, or they use them as snipers on board the ship. They tie them to the mast and try to pick off, like, the captain or gunners. What do we call naval infantry? What do we call them in the United States? Marines. And Marines, to this day, are technically part of the Navy. And if you want to have some fun, a really good time, if you know someone who's a Marine or was a Marine, remind them they're in the Navy, and you'll meet a new friend. A friend for life. And if you do, remember, Mr. Mahelish told you to say that, right? We're all cool on that? All right. Good luck on that. Have a good day, everybody. Right when you find work, and hang by your thumbs. That's what's turned. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Maybe you can also.
I want it to be parallel to this. Yeah. Everything's symmetrical. Have a good day, everybody. I gotta shut off the film.